nature's, the universe's gifts.
Yes.
Is the
Yes.
coffee.
See, what's really funny is I pressed live right in the middle of that, Pat. So folks that are jumping in right now have no idea what is that God gift. It's us. Come on, look at us, folks. That's why we do the video here. All right. For those of you on the video side, hey, it's great to see you all. Thank you all for coming in. And let's go live for the podcast side in 3, 2, 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, just how excited are we to have Kadarius Toney on our fantasy football team? That and more this week on the couch. Pat Doherty. Pat, how excited are you to have Kadarius Toney?
I was so excited. I almost answered like in the middle of your intro. I was going to cut off your intro.
Perfect.
And I'm going to say I'm going to make a reference the Zoomers won't get. I'm going to push it to 11 on my amp.
Yes.
For Kadarius Toney, and a pick that we kind of laughed at. It was a mysterious pick,
right?
A very intriguing player, a guy who was being billed more as like an offensive weapon, as a guy who was like a ready-made NFL receiver. What was the stat? I think he had only 18 games or something of official wide receiver experience at Florida. Picked by front office, not known for its amazing picks, not known for having like a great overall vision on offense, but in week 4, it was immediately clear to me what they saw on Kadarius Toney. Like, oh wow, like this guy. I had watched the cut ups or whatever. I'm an SEC fan. I watched a lot of Florida games, but I had never noticed like how truly like rare and insane like his stop start ability is. Like, totally different body type, and he's a more explosive player probably. Like the way like his feet move reminded me like LaShawn McCoy, kind of like this really rare stop start ability. And now kind of in the right place at the right time with all these receiver injuries, Saquon Barkley injured. Like he's stepped in with like an 80-yard game, 190-yard game.
Right.
And I just couldn't get over it. In that Saints game, I was like, man, this guy's feet, even in a league full of athletic freaks, this guy's feet move at a different speed as everyone else's.
Yes, I love it. I think that, and you match the excitement motif perfectly. And I think starting out with the story of Toney is a great place to start because I faded him. Look, I'll admit I have so many mistakes to admit to. I feel like this is.
I know, me too.
Pat, this season I'm like Benny Hill, man. I'm the butt of the joke and everything.
Let's just turn this into a tribunal on both of us,
right?
And we'll begin with Kadarius Toney.
Right. Well, because like you said, it wasn't an imaginative organization. It was an odd pick, certainly. And then so far to date, through like week 3, Kadarius Toney's career matched the downside, right? Like for whatever reason he was missing practice. It was like a bingo card of the reasons he could miss practice, right? And then a la Justin Jefferson, he wasn't really integrated into the offense right away. He didn't have a role. And that also aligned again with us thinking, well, this isn't exactly an imaginative group. Although they did spend the capital, that's another thing. Well, is Dave Gettleman on the same page with Jason Garrett? Who knows? This is potentially a dysfunctional organization, although we can talk about dysfunctional organizations. It's really hard to keep the gossips TMZ side out of football, right?
This year
it's getting harder.
The past 10 days, that's been all it's been.
Right? And who knows what's around the next corner. But we know with Toney, like you said, against all odds, and injuries intervened. He got an opportunity.
As they so often do.
Him, right. And when you watched him, because it was opposite of a typical first-round pick who gets opportunity after opportunity, he needed some injury luck, so to speak. And like you said, and guns are a polarizing thing now, so I don't want to think about guns. Explosiveness, right? We use the word explosive a lot. But when you watch Toney's short area quicks, it really is like there's some combustible thing, like substance in his twitchy doesn't even begin to describe it. And like you said, you're watching SEC, and SEC is a pretty good simulation of NFL quality athleticism, but you still don't think, okay, he's going to look the same on Sunday as he did on Saturday. There's just a handful of guys, Kyle Pitts, and this is why I like this happening for him and for Jamar Chase too, where really they are translating. And Kyle Pitts, it's coming, right? We saw a glimpse of it as the Jets, but this is how you catch lightning in a bottle. In fantasy also is, again, it's that slow take. The rookie, he can't be that good. He can't sustain that. But when you see it translate the way it does with Toney, there needs to be the will for the team to use him. And then, of course, in total poetic Toney fashion, he gets thrown out of the game.
I know.
and he gets hurt. I mean,
and he accidentally headbutted somebody.
Right. I mean, it's just, but you can see how intense he is. And, he was an ultimate boom bust type prospect where it was just a short time. He wasn't necessarily a polished product. There was lots of signs of off field or at least personality. Like, man, it's the NFL, a lot of things that would make him not fit, but on the field, he fits and then some. But it's just about that feeling of getting carried away. And I think we should get carried away by Kadarius. When I say excitement, because let's not go down the self-loathing path. I knew you and I would probably just wallow in self. Welcome to another week of self-loathing. That's what we should do, Pat. This should be our side project where we just talk about fantasy football, but really get at self-loathing. But no, let's get at the excitement of fantasy football. Where else is the excitement of fantasy football lied for you this year?
Well, the number one thing, like off the top of my head, like I can't lie and claim it's someone other than Kyler Murray, who, as you know, I've been all in on like since the beginning, and seeing Kyler take like maybe the final step he needed to superstardom. I mean, he was already almost there, but like we're basically have seen like the graduation of Kyler Murray. I feel like we're just totally indefensible. And he finally had like kind of a down game and a really weird game with the 49ers. I think that game, I can't remember what Vegas was claiming to us there'd be 54 points, and I think it was literally half that with 27, a real like slugfest type game. But I've been so into Kyler Murray being like the perfect modern quarterback, basically, where like the genuine threat with his legs, hit like for a dual threat, quote unquote, like a really pure passer. I mean, he is a pure passer. He's like a pure passer that happens to be super dangerous with his legs. And I mean, Justin Herbert too. I mean, not to go quarterback to the least relevant fantasy position, not the least relevant fantasy position, but Justin Herbert too. Like I was so happy for Justin Herbert's week 5 because there's been kind of a disconnect between real life Justin Herbert and fantasy Justin Herbert so far. Like he hadn't quite exploded in fantasy. He was on the QB1 borderline for week 5. He was kind of in like the QB 10 to 14 range in the rankings. And he kind of had his first down game in week 4 against the Raiders. He didn't look like amazing on Monday Night Football, especially in the second half. He was missing a few throws he doesn't usually miss. But I mean, I guess it's a cliche answer, but those young quarterbacks.
Oh, yeah, no.
We're finally getting the turnover. I mean, I said, Tom Brady is blood immortal, as they like to say. He's not turning over, but we're getting the turnover where the old guys are almost all gone. And the young guys are like seizing the mantle. They're not just like defaulting into the mantle. They are seizing it.
Yeah, can I get an amen for Lamar Jackson under seizing the mantle?
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Talk about an amazing performance. And I was just saying too, Kyle Pitts. You mentioned Kadarius Toney. Watching Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney in week 5 made me feel a little better as a Mizzou fan. Losing to Florida yet again last year.
Right.
How did this team ever lose a game with these guys on their team?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, right? I want to go back to Murray and what you said about Murray. And I got excited about Murray. I got carried away about Murray. I kept doing the Kyler Murray, Michael Vick thing.
I knew that you were almost as into the Kyler Murray experience as I was.
And like you said, he's a pure passer in the sense that he's not a pure pocket passer. Okay. I mean, he's actually another one. There's these quarterbacks, Pat, where really what you want to do is you want to have them on flat-footed in the pocket and thinking. Like that's when they're at their least dangerous. Like that's Kyler Murray. But Lamar Jackson's saying that's not me. I'm just dangerous, period. Anyway, so I wanted to get a piece of Murray, and I ended up trading away Lamar Jackson to do it. And it was just one of these things where that's where the joke was. Like you just go from one to the other. Justin Herbert, I just want to say, while we're on that topic, I'm going to hit this one. These are the things that people know what's coming here. But I like saying it just like this, Pat. I have a crush on Brandon Staley.
I mean, same everyone
right?
in the industry, I think. He's the prince who was promised. There's no way around it.
Yes. That's why I said I use the capital G great head coach. He's the next great head coach, but he's the first 21st century great head coach.
Truly.
And it's so much fun to watch. And for him to be aligned with Justin Herbert is just and Herbert's another one. Like you said, there's the promised ones or the chosen ones in a way. And what we see with these people is really a transcendence, especially against the background of everything else that's happening in football, right? But there's a transcendent quality to some of these players and coaches. And I think that, again, with Brandon Staley, just seeing the positivity enthusiasm, love, and of course, all of the cultivated mental and analytical 21st century tools also. But he has those things married. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting, Pat, because you mentioned old guys going away because Brady, talk about transcendental. I don't even know if Brady's transcendental, though. Brady's transcendental in the way that, like, when the comic book villain is the star of the comic book, are there any I don't read comic books, but
I don't either.
I just outed myself.
We can pretend that we do.
Well, the NFL is a lot like comic books, actually. It's funny that I don't see the comic book movies, but I watch the NFL religiously and make it the centerpiece of my professional life, and it's not that different, really.
No, I don't know why. A quick aside, I'm not into the comic book movies at all.
Right.
Sometimes I feel very judgmental about it. Then I have to remember, hold on.
Me too. Yeah.
I have to remember, hold on. You are literally a fantasy football career professional. Can't be too judgmental.
Exactly. It's just wherever we find that truth. Like a truth bigger than like whether the story is true or not. But these are like real people. Like, how is that? But is Tom Brady a real person? I mean, it's still, if we could get some of his DNA, like, I don't know. But we were lucky enough to be under the sign of the Brady, Peyton, Ben Roethlisberger, with Joe Flacco making a little cameo in there. Just this, like, these epic battles between the teams, but also between the quarterbacks. And we were looking at, and like, we get Lamar Jackson and Herbert this weekend, and Mahomes, and seeing these permutations. Josh Allen, the AFC now has those epic quarterbacks that when the two of them urge each other to a higher level and each other's teams to a higher level, well, anything's possible. That's where the excitement is. You're right. It's a cliche, Pat, because it's what drives the NFL.
And how is it always the AFC, by the way? We're on the second generation now of all the generational talents getting funneled to the AFC. And I had a lot of spare thoughts as you were talking. And one with Herbert, I would say I've noticed is that one thing, like, already setting Justin Herbert apart is I feel like he's gotten in like that Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers category of like signature throws where I see him make a throw. And like, I think like he's the only quarterback that can make that throw. Like Patrick Mahomes can maybe make more impressive singular throws. Aaron Rodgers can, but like he's like creating his own category of like, that was a Herbert only throw. I'm not saying that's like the best kind of throw in the NFL. I don't know if this makes sense at all, but like, he's like developed like a signature type throw that like only he can do already. Like something that only talents like Mahomes and Rodgers can do. Or he's like one of those players. I'm like, man, there's not another quarterback in the league that just completed that. But I don't know what I'm trying to describe what it is with Herbert. I feel like, is he like a low arch? Like there's something about Herbert's like throws that looks special and different to me.
Yeah, well, with the Herbert, it's the integration of everything, right? I mean, it's the athleticism. There's something about him. It's in his resting facial expression of just calm.
Yeah, he has an inner calmness. He really does.
Yes, he radiates inner calm, and it's a little different than the Joe Burrow inner calm, which is much more of smoldering intensity.
Yes,
Justin
you can see
Herbert,
it on the surface with Burrow.
Right. But it's really, and may Joe Burrow be in this conversation eventually. I mean, for Cincinnati last week. On one hand, you're a good enough team to tangle with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. On the other hand, you threw the game away, and then that doesn't even begin to describe kickers. I guess I don't know if you and I have talked kickers before. Abolish kickers. Like on this week, that kickers really were in the on the list. Do you believe in abolishing kickers in fantasy leagues? You run the league. You think your leagues was the first league I was in, Pat, to have no kickers and defenses. So I guess I know the answer here.
Well, I was pressured by Evan Silva on that one. Like, I'm not like full blown abolish kickers because then you give like that extra flex spot and like you lose in the leagues with no kickers. I feel like the benches get so thin. Where I kind of like the forced decisions. I kind of like to have some actually good players on my bench occasionally. So I'm not full blown abolish kickers, but I will say in the leagues and without kickers, I don't miss them. So maybe about. And by the way, the kickers doing this in week 5. I mean, in America right now, I mean it's only October. The weather is still mostly fine. Like to have this happening in week 5 bodes very poorly for the kickers. It's like the winter winds begin to settle over the continent. Like this is the kind of week you're supposed to have in like week 12, not week 5. So it's a bad omen for the kickers.
It is. Who knows? Maybe, just maybe, this is like a chrysalis, and what hatches out of it, Pat, is, speaking of guys like Brandon Staley, just a more aggressive style of managing a game where you don't put it in the kicking. Like, the goal is to not put it on the kicking game, right? The goal is to not have your fate decided by your kicking game. You have it if you're in a pinch and you need it, but you want your fate decided by your quarterback. You want your fate decided by your best players, the players you've invested the most in, not your kicker, not your long snapper, not your holder. So, maybe it could make for a much more entertaining football. If, again, we're just going to come back to Brandon Staley every 5 minutes and say, if everyone could be more like Brandon Staley, and the NFL would be a better place.
They wouldn't have won the game without that mindset. They would have lost the game without those fourth down conversions, without going for it on fourth down. And you understand like the human nature, because like the downside is so visible when you go for it and don't make it. And invariably the play call looks horrible and you look like a dunce. You feel like an idiot. But the mathematical odds are on your side. I mean, especially when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert, like 4th and 4, you're going to convert like 70% of the time,
right?
80% of the time,
right?
And like if you did it, like the backfires are spectacular, and that's what sticks in everyone's mind. But over the course of a 17 season, if you consistently do it, you might steal 2 or 3 games, which is like a massive sum.
Not just that, Pat. Let's go into some more philosophical talk here. Not just that, but you want your guys used to it going for it on fourth down in big moments. So if you do it as a regular course of business, by the time you're getting to the playoffs, there's not just this intense and tightness that comes with, oh my God, everything rides on this play, because you're used to it. Same thing with the 2-point conversion. Same thing. I mean, bless his heart, Dan Campbell went for 2. It's one of the things that was lost in last week.
I know.
Oh my God, the Lions, man. The Lions are really pathos, like really compelling.
They are.
I mean, really compelling. Dan Campbell crying. It's like, while we are talking about John Gruden, or while we're talking about Urban Meyer or whatever, let's also talk about Dan Campbell and Brandon Staley. Let's talk about Dan Campbell because he loves his players. I'm sorry, I'm lapsing back into like 17 times a day. I'm talking to Cecil, sorry. And Pat, there's a whole side of the NFL that we may know about, but we never experience, which is what happens to the relationship between the players and the people in the organization over the course of the journey of the season, And with Dan Campbell, I think you just really see it bear out there, how emotional it is. And but he went for 2. The gods, somehow Alexander Mattison fumbled in a game Detroit had no business even being in, but Mike Zimmer was happy to like drive slow in the driveway.
6 straight runs.
Right.
Not good.
And then Campbell, they score the touchdown, Pat, and he goes for 2. And they make it. It was beautiful.
It was.
And then the NFL had its own things in mind. Okay, let's talk some fantasy football.
I gotta say real quick, and Dan Campbell, as you said, another guy who just exudes positivity, and a guy who, despite the caricature of him, like I remembered him from his Dolphins interim stint. There's like lots of like really philosophical type quotes from him. So I knew there was always a little bit more going on there than met the eye, and that he was going to be an interesting football figure.
Well, and also he's gotten a chance to learn from Sean Payton. And by the way, if we want to talk about compelling things going on in the NFL, like I think Jameis Winston really might have convinced Sean Payton it's God's plan. I really think he might have him on board. Seriously, I'm living in New Orleans, Pat.
I know,
so you understand something in the water that I might be more prone to believe these things. But I really think after the Hail Mary last week, not just after the Hail Mary, that he called the Hail Mary. Now the Saints kicking has been a problem, so maybe it was the better thing to do. But when you get the ball at midfield, you have a few seconds. Like you try to set up a long field goal, right? That's the thing to do. Although this was the anti-kicker week. And it was a thing of beauty, Jameis. It is God's plan, and it's God's plan that Sean Payton had hopefully that good influence on him and on Joe Lombardi. Speaking of Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert. Okay, fantasy football takes. Like 10 minutes ago, I didn't know this until someone in the chat room said it. Clyde Edwards-Helaire on injured reserve. All right, so now we know 3 games. How excited are we to get Daryl Williams on the waiver wire, or should we be looking at Jerick McKinnon or even Marlon Mack, or just not in this situation because Kansas City actually is a different team than what we thought?
I've had Darrell Wilson. I said Darrell Williams holstered. I was trying to say Williams into holstered. Darrell Williams holstered in several leagues, and the Marlon Mack thing I'm eyeing very closely. And the Colts are not being very subtle. Like they were basically showcasing Marlon Mack a little bit last night, like trying to say, yeah, come on, he's healthy. Trade a conditional 5th round pick for him, 6th round pick for him. That is a big worry for Darrell Williams, but like I'm excited for Darrell Williams because like he's a Chiefs running back that we can finally have like realistic expectations for. Like we know he's not going to be like soaking up 6 to 8 targets. Like that won't ever enter the thought process when you're starting Darrell Williams in season long or maybe using him in DFS and just viewing him as like a pure finisher in one of the league's best offenses, kind of struggling right now, but going in to extremely soft portion of the schedule and kind of just like a free money RB2, I'd say. Because Jerick McKinnon, I mean, I feel like he would have been a little more involved by now if he had the juice. He just, his legs appeared gone last year. I mean, he had enough juice to make the 53-man roster of the Kansas City Chiefs. So we can't, just write him off. But I mean, I'm kind of writing him off, I guess. And
sure.
I think Darrell Williams is ready for like his RB2 moment. Maybe it's like a pure touchdown score. But like this is the way we should have been viewing probably the Chiefs running backs all along. It's just like a guy who's going to finish drives for a really high scoring offense. And might not be, catching a ton of passes, might not be compiling a ton of his own yardage. And I feel like expectations will be pretty low for Darrell, especially in a week, there's like a lot of running back fab activity. And I am excited about Darrell Williams, like that RB, like 20 to 28 range.
Yeah. And it's something that probably won't be lost on, by the way, on Darrell Williams, just real quick. I want to say history repeating itself, right? Because who's the last Chiefs back that you think of like this? Spencer Ware. Right.
That's right. Oh my gosh. The fullback.
Right. It's the fullback, right? It's the LSU backup running back taking over for Kansas City and being, like you said, competent in this offense can be good for fantasy. I don't know how good it will be, but it doesn't matter because
it's true. I mean, I'm not trying to oversell Darrell Williams.
Yeah, of course not. And we're not trying to oversell Kansas City in the situation either, because, there was a time that we were uncertain. Is it the situation or, you plug Kareem Hunt in and he brings numbers. Spencer Ware's numbers were terrific for half a season as a lead back in this role, right? And then when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was drafted, we're like, okay, here we go. Here's the next one. Damian Williams. Well, maybe we underestimate Damian Williams.
I did.
Bit. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. So we're always adjusting, right? How much of it is the situation? How much of it is the player? How much does the player add? But even if Darrell Williams doesn't add very much, this is something that do the opposite, upside down, zero running back drafters will just nod along, right? When if even a running back who just has a reasonable chance of getting 10 to 15 points, you're fine with that in your running back 2 spot. You don't need a lockdown stud. And every week there's more of those available, while some of the first, second, third round running backs you're looking at and you're thinking, what do I even have here right now?
Yeah, Darrell Williams just makes you confront the reality of the Chiefs backfield. Like, this is not going to be a backfield where the running back is the star of the show, like, ever.
No.
They're not even going to be like individual game plans where the running back's the star of the show. He's just a guy that's going to be out there to move the chains occasionally and finish drives. We placed way too much on Clyde Edwards-Helaire's shoulders, and we can just be more realistic about the situation with Darrell Williams.
So what's on this topic, because you're a St. Louis guy, right?
I am.
Like born and bred?
I am, yeah. The suburbs. I can't claim,
Yeah. St. Louis area, whatever. I'm
only 30 minutes from downtown, so I'm not like 90 minutes away or whatever.
Exactly. I was born in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Bentleyville, Pennsylvania, with a stint in New Mexico when I was a little kid. But whatever. I'm from Pittsburgh, in the sense of like the sphere of influence and the way an urban area is a beacon of like the region. So I want to ask you quickly, because I could talk about Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, right? There's animosity between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. There's a real sense like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, really Pennsylvania is 3 states, Western, Central, and Eastern Pennsylvania. And Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are very different. Ethnically, they're very different. The whole story of when and how they became a big part of American history is different.
Yes.
And then that's reflected, like, I think the Steelers and the Eagles, not so much. Maybe they'll one day meet in a Super Bowl. But like the Flyers and the Penguins, it comes out.
It does. I've noticed that.
Penn State used to be like that too. Penn State used to be like that in the same way that Texas and Texas A&M were like not just 2 schools and student bodies, but walks of life. So what's it like? Is there anything between St. Louis and Kansas City?
Well, here's how I always describe what's going on in this little region of the world, of the country, is that St. Louis has a Chicago inferiority complex.
Oh, right.
And people in Kansas City might disagree with this. I think Kansas City has a St. Louis inferiority complex.
Okay.
They kind of like oversell Kansas City. Oh, it's the better arts town. It's the cleaner town. It's the nicer town. Mm-hmm. But people don't realize like Kansas City is like a lot smaller than St. Louis. It's like the St. Louis metro area is like 3 million people. The Kansas City metro area is like barely 2. And maybe this is just like the St. Louis and me projecting.
Sure, no, but
feelings
that's truth. That's your truth, man.
Yeah, that's how I feel like it works. Is that Kansas City is jealous of St. Louis. St. Louis is very jealous of Chicago, and that's kind of like the pecking order here in my my little Midwestern neck of the woods.
I get it, but all three places are special and unique places.
They are. They're all great. Kansas City is a really great town with a lot of like really cool cultural niches that St. Louis doesn't have.
They've etched their way into history with their contributions to American culture. And St. Louis, I mean, St. Louis was one of the most important cities in the world, you know. So, and Chicago, yes, well, yeah. I mean, living in New Orleans, all right, we're on the Mississippi River.
Exactly, we got that kinship. I live right at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, by the way. Wow. It's really cool. It's
incredible to ponder the watershed, like the drainage, like all the water that is draining, and you know all the little specks of dirt from those glaciers and that snowfall. That's what made New Orleans. All that little dirt in the Mississippi and the flooding.
It's true.
The reason there's sediment. A place here. So we're on the land from like even way further north. Anyway, I bring that up because Kansas City. We do this in fantasy, right? We're like, hey, we had these priors coming into the season, things looking different, but if you stuck with your priors, you did well. Sometimes you were right for the wrong reasons, right? Like this is just gonna be my greatest hits of being wrong this year, and there's still more to come. It's like Ezekiel Elliott, I thought Dallas's defense is bad. You saw in week 1 against Tampa, they had to throw the ball a ridiculous number of times. Zeke is more of a pass blocker than a pass receiver at this point. They see what Pollard is. They're going to do like a 2/3, 1/3 thing. And it's just not going to be like what we expected with Zeke. But then, no, the defense is actually good, like maybe good with a capital G, good all of a sudden. No. And now they can leverage their offensive line, which is healthy again. And they can leverage Zeke and Pollard and make life easy for Dak, who can just throw to the tight end all day and not even have to take risks, take hits or run. It's a whole different Cowboys team. And that's why Zeke automatically gets the call inside the 5. And that's why Zeke has been a hit. Not the way necessarily you drew it up. But if you said, hey, it's a good offense, good offensive line, Zeke will figure it out. You absolutely kudos. But with Kansas City, whether it's an NFL take in terms of, I mean, you have to ask, like, are they going to win the division, or if things don't change soon, like, are they going to be on the fringe of the playoff picture? Or do you think we'll wake up from this in a couple of weeks and they'll be a great team again?
I think it's probably going to be more the latter. It's weird they're having like so many coverage busts, like, and they're in year 3 of the SPAG system. That's what I don't understand, is why the defense looks so disorganized. Maybe just like a lack of talent. Finally, missed defensive draft picks is catching up with them. And it's weird. They have like a very bad tiebreaker situation developing, where they don't have the tiebreaker with the Chargers right now. They don't have a tiebreaker with the Ravens. They don't have the tiebreaker with who's the other? They lost another important conference game where they're in bad tiebreaker. Yeah,
you said Chargers.
Chargers, Ravens, and somebody.
But
like the Bills, yes, of course. But it was a narrow loss, very, very narrow loss to the Ravens. It was a pretty narrow loss to the Chargers. The whole game with the Bills could have been completely different without the roughing the passer. Not that the Bills weren't the victims of some bad calls themselves in that game, a very poorly officiated game. But the Chiefs, I still think, I almost feel like the Chiefs. I hate like projecting this kind of stuff onto athletes and stuff, but I almost feel like they got some like the Golden Warriors syndrome, Golden State Warriors syndrome, where like they're so good, their offense was so elevated that it's like kind of like human nature to like not turn it on 100% all the time. And they got to coast a little bit last year. They coasted to 14-2, like kind of like papered over some deficiencies. And now they're in a situation where coasting is not going to be an option. Could almost be like good for them. I know it's annoying when people try to spin. Here's why it's actually good that this team is 2-3, but like they're not going to have the luxury of coasting this season anymore. And like it could be like a perfectly needed like wake up call, both for them this season and kind of like for like their dynastic project. Like, yeah, I mean, listen, like we have to be like the New England Patriots, and like every week is like the Super Bowl basically. And like again, I'm not for all I know they weren't coasting at all, but they're on just such a different level. It was almost like they were like the rare NFL team. You can almost see them turning it on and off. And I think this will just be a good development for them. Where like now they have to be hard charging the whole season.
Yeah, well, that's what it's going to test, right? I mean, that's the NFL. It's a crucible, and you see what comes out because, they get after Washington this week, they have to go to Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill is usually not an easy out. The Giants,
Our
and
boy
then
Tony's gonna have to take over the game.
right, exactly. Hopefully, Danny Dimes is growing on me. Steely
I
Dan,
know.
he's against my will. He's growing on me.
The diet Josh Allen 3rd-year leap is
Right,
happening for Danny. That was the best case outcome.
It really was. And then it's all defying Gettleman and Garrett and Joe Judge. And then Aaron Rodgers going to Vegas. And no matter where these teams are, Vegas the Raiders can always play the Chiefs tough. And then Dallas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not getting easier for the Chiefs. And it's going to test them and you see what they have. Because if you trace the trajectory, Pat, like you said, they kind of coasted last year. Turn it on, turn it off, right? They get to the playoffs. What happens? Mahomes gets hurt. And they have to Chad Henne, right? Isn't it beautiful for Chad Henne, by the way, that now there's something you'll associate with his name that is like triumphant, Too bad they didn't get a ring. That wasn't part of a ring, but either way. And then, so they survived by the hair on their chin. And then they clobber the Bills, who just came in scared. The Bills just
I know scared. They went away from what they did well too. Like didn't they try to like run more? I can't remember what they did. Like everything about their game plan.
It all felt like stage fright. It was all like the stage. It was the AFC Championship, and the stage was almost too big for them. McDermott and Allen and they all fed off of it, I think. And then they go to the Super Bowl and they just get run over by a truck. I mean, and that's not something that they're used to experiencing. And then things start this year with Cleveland. Okay, fine, you eke out a win. You can beat up on Philadelphia. But Baltimore stole a game from them, the Chargers, Buffalo, and we'll see what they're made of. That's what's really fun about the NFL season is it's always becoming, right? It's in the act. It's like a chemical reaction that's becoming and happening before our eyes. It doesn't sit still. It doesn't stay inert or static. It's never static. It's why we always look so bad. And
I know,
well, it's funny, Pat. So this is why we're past half hour. So it's so funny. And folks on the couch, viewers, listeners, you all have been so gracious, in a lot of ways. I get to do this instead of having something that eats away at my soul faster because of y'all. But I feel more inclined every day, Pat, to say man, I mean, we've reached like saturation of fantasy football coverage, right?
Yes.
I mean, I never could have imagined it in my life that we would get to this point of fantasy football coverage. And it's great in a lot of ways because we have lots of new faces, new voices, new ways of thinking about it, new analysis. But it's so, I mean, it's almost like we started out we were able to fit in a hockey arena, and then it got to a football stadium, and now it's so big that you can't see the edges of it, and in some ways that it's like a din that is overwhelming. So I think Paul Charging and I went off the rails at 36 minutes. We were talking about the Prince halftime show. We were talking about the halftime show of the Super Bowl. We were talking about Prince and Minnesota, and then we were off. And that's how I feel these days. And then also the way that there's so many football stories that are not football stories, but are still football stories, also infiltrates that bubble. And I don't know where to say, except I'm creating a space for you to fill with whatever you want.
I'll say the industry, we used to be this real self-contained little world. And now it's the ultimate first world problem where there's not only too many people to follow on Twitter, there's too many legitimately good people. I know there's people out there that are very worth the follow, fantasy football content creators that would be enriching my fantasy life. But it's there's so many people that it's I don't even know who to choose from anymore. Mm-hmm. And they're all very intimidating to me. They're all very smart. They're all very stats based. And I'm wow, I just feel a lot dumber than all these new people. And I'm kind of more of an old school. Not that I'm a dinosaur analyst, but I feel dumb compared to they have numbers for everything. Yeah. And not that I lack numbers, but the industry has changed a lot. There's so many people, and they're not. There's just so many good people. I don't even know where to go anymore.
Yeah, I feel and of course this is going to be something an age thing in a way, Pat, because I think that may you live long enough for the world to not make sense to you anymore. There's the Grandpa Simpson speech of one day you won't understand it, you won't be with it anymore. But it's really an existential way, because especially an asymptotic curve, right? Like it's like exponential. Like things are changing
It's
faster.
exponential.
Yeah, I mean, you really can feel like a hurtling. One of my aha moments lately, because Lord knows you all probably understand. Like I have any number of threads or voices in my head going on at any time, right? And
Same.
sometimes one of the voices will say something that will make me stop and say, "Yes, that's it, that's it." And what it was, Pat, was that we're not walking through history or climbing through history. We're free falling through history. We're like tumbling down a hill through history. You know, that's just like the state that it has always been. And but it just feels like that more and more the older that you get. So people that are younger, I think, are more in tune with just the language of today, which is, like you said, numbers analysis, or like seeing the world as data. And since I'm a philosopher and I've studied like the philosophy of math, like I get that. That's great. I mean, numbers are more likely God's language than words, right? You can express
True.
more with numbers. Like the language of the universe is mathematics. And I get it, but like you said, old school, where I come back around to it, is it's a human story in essence. You know,
Yeah.
the numbers describe something that happens, but the actual story is in the human beings. Go ahead.
No, I don't even know. I was not trying to go on an anti-numbers rant either. Like, because I mean, I've definitely enriched my fantasy football understanding and process with numbers. The only thing I will say about numbers is that it is very easy to like seize on like one little number is like the most important. Like, I'm trying to think of like they're all bad examples, but like like air yards, target share. It's just like very easy to like seize on like an important data point that's like not close to like the most important data point. And like still, I feel like we're still in the process of sifting out like what are the truly important like kind of underlying metrics. I mean, we're pretty close. We're pretty close, I'd say. But it can be easy to seize on something that seems like a big deal that just really isn't, and like ignore like something very obvious, like, well, how much is this guy getting the ball? And
Right. It's there's the classic forest trees thing going on. There's problems of correlation and causation.
Yes, and the sample sizes are so small in football. It's a lot easier in baseball or basketball, where there's like no doubt, and there's fewer variables. Where it's not 22 players smashing into each other. You know.
So you're absolutely right. So one of the things, it strikes me when you say sample size, because we talk about sample size a lot. I remember sample size when I was in college, like learning how to get policies you wanted passed by doing surveys, and sample size would always have to match all kinds of rules for it to be valid, just as a result of a survey. Now they probably put any survey out there. I mean, now, granted, the class that I took, one of the books was actually titled "How to Lie with Statistics." It was an actual textbook for the class, and it wasn't like tongue in cheek. Yeah. Anyway, so you know, sample size, but in football, it's not even just the size of the sample, Pat. It's the sample so different from week to week.
Exactly. There's so many variables. Baseball, I mean, it's truly mano a mano in baseball.
Yeah, and I mean, really, where football analytic sample size is adequate is like if a team plays another team enough for like the key players and the coaches are the same, but that rarely ever even happens. But with baseball, so I've been watching because it's the postseason.
I know you're watching the baseball playoffs.
Yeah, of course. As I've said, and I try to do this because it's like saying a little thank you prayer. Like 11-year-old me, like the idea of sitting on, I might even know what a laptop would have existed. I don't even know what that looked like. I had a Commodore 64 at some point, I think. But and watching baseball and writing and thinking about football as my job is like, how could life be any better? It doesn't always feel that way once you get there. So I like to commemorate that. But watching baseball now, they have wonderfully illuminating stats about, whatever. They can understand even some of the things I see, like the second time through the order and the third time through the order, what the batting average is against, they are able to isolate like a certain pitch in a certain zone to make it, because the sample size is that big. And it reminds me about playing fantasy baseball before fantasy football. But fantasy baseball just doesn't have the stomach twisting turns that fantasy football has.
I love fantasy baseball. I do love, like, fantasy baseball is like the true marathon. So I am a huge fantasy baseball fan. But with the baseball advanced stats, or just even the baseball normal stats, there's like nowhere to hide. There's like very little gray area. Like we have such great predictive stats in baseball, like batting average on balls in play, or you're fielding independent pitch. Like you can see what's going to come, like the regression that's going to come before it does. But football is just so much tougher because like 5 games, you get 5 games in baseball in the first week. By Friday, you've had 5 games. In football, we have 5 games. it could be wildly different opponents. It could have been like a weather factor, injury factor. You have two linemen hurt. There's so much noise in the stats, advanced or otherwise, that I do feel like it's harder to like sift through what truly matters in the football stats. And whereas baseball, like basically knocks you over the head with a 2x4, and it's so black and white.
Yeah.
That is a challenge for advanced football stats. By the way, when you're talking about like hurdling, like through time and space,
history,
I know. So I know that's kind of like the constant state of human existence and like human nature, but especially over like the past, 500 or 600 years, basically since like the Middle Ages. But like, so every human being like thinks they kind of live at like a hinge point of history. I do think it's like particularly pronounced right now, and like even like small, like you and I are probably we're probably less than 10 years apart in age, I think.
I'm 46.
I'm 35.
Okay,
like
11.
Even 10 years, your experience was so much like you had I got the internet when I was like 8 years old.
Right.
You didn't get the internet to probably 18.
College.
18? Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like one of the last people on earth that's going to have pre-internet memories. Like I still do remember what life was like before the internet. Like, oh, I just have to ask people. I have to get a reference book or something.
Go to the library.
Like I'm one of the last people on earth that's going to have memories of that, like of a pre-internet existence. And it's like, I know everyone always thinks they live in like this time of like unprecedented change, because they do. But like the hinge point of like pre and post internet is going to be one of like the biggest like divergent points in like human history. And like, so I think that does up the state, like the feelings of like alienation and like listlessness and like, what am I even doing? Like even more pronounced than usual in like the age that we're living in right now.
Yeah, maybe we always were data in a sense. Maybe we always were just big globs of data, like equations, like answers to a whole bunch of equations colliding. But it's hidden from us. It's emotionally, spiritually, psychologically not anything we have to really grapple with. And then whenever I was thinking a Radiohead song, Dollars and Cents, I mean, it's just a bleak, but yeah, I think when I say there's a quote out there, Calm York said the Kid A was like from a time or a place like after we ruined everything.
It's which boy is it feeling prescient.
right. So it's just when you don't reduce those things, because at the same time we're all like a universe in and of ourselves, so it's hard. And this is, I guess, why we always come back to these. We search for these kind of spiritual traditions, and I guess that's one of the things that data, like, where's the church of data? Like, where I had like another thought I had recently, and I will get this back to. Oh, let me get this back to football this way. Okay, I'll get it back to football this way. In baseball, they have a great stat: runs saved. Right?
Yes, defensive runs saved, DRS.
Right. And it's beautiful because it illuminates the importance of the defensive side of the game that a player can contribute. And it makes an easier justification for having somebody out there who's a light hitter or a low average hitter or someone who strikes out a lot or whatever, because they add in their own way. And we really easily could have something like that for football: points saved by defenders, right? There was a point in the New England Houston game where I felt like Matt Judon basically saved New England 4 points after a turnover. And I feel like we could quantify that. And I think that it would be another interesting way to add to IDP fantasy football, which I like just because it gets you to know the defensive side of the game. And it's just more fun with the more you know when you watch a game. Okay, we have to talk a little bit more about fantasy before we go completely off the rails, because I was really going to go off the rails there for a second.
I got a lot of thoughts in the universe, Sig.
I do too. This is all what we really want to talk about, right? Like, this is all what's all on our minds in between, like, the stuff we have to do. Who is your fantasy football? You can't say Kyler Murray, okay? Who is your fantasy football MVP so far through 5 weeks?
For me personally, it's just based on the obscure scoring standards of one of my league. It's Jonathan Taylor. The distance touchdown last night really saved me. Who is my overall fantasy MVP though? So I mean, hard to go wrong with Austin Eckler, who I felt like we were ranking. Like, it was easy to feel like we were ranking Austin Eckler too high, like it's like the RB 6, 7, 8 or whatever, and it's so far not looking high enough. He's RB 2, 3. I mean, he's quite literally winning leagues right now.
Yes.
And then probably, I mean, the true MVP, if we're like return on investment, like expect like more value than expect, like Cooper Kupp, kind of hard to go. Barely being drafted as a a wide receiver 3. Not barely. He was being drafted as a wide receiver. He's being drafted as a wide receiver too, actually.
Sure. 4th, 5th round.
Yeah. But getting, 10 plus targets all 5 games. Like I give the edge like Cooper Kupp over Mike Williams because we like at least expected something from Cooper Kupp. Mike Williams was like, you kind of got him. There wasn't really a plan. I feel like when you drafted Mike Williams, you just kind of drafted Mike Williams. I've gone. I don't even know. I'm on a huge tangent here.
No. These are the good names to talk about. Look, first of all, Mike Williams to me stands for when a coach says something, we listen to the coach.
I know. I was about to say that I kind of made it sound like you just blindly drafted Mike Williams. That wasn't true. There was the comment that they were going to use
Joe Lombardi.
Yeah, they were going to use him the way they used Michael Thomas, and I didn't pay attention to that.
Well, I did and didn't. I mean, I didn't draft like that. I certainly talked about it a lot. People, my listeners are much smarter than me. I just I'm like Niagara Falls or something, like the river. This keeps going, and they figure out like what's flotsam and jetsam, and what's actually like some nice scrap metal that you can burn, like melt down and make some value out of. Cooper Kupp, I think, is quarterback. Just the quarterback.
Yeah,
it's not even just the quarterback change because actually Jared Goff zeroed in on him. But it's just higher value targets with Matthew Stafford. But this idea that Kupp has this gravity to him, that he just makes the game easier for the quarterback. He's just going to make the game easier for the quarterback. And that gets amplified when you have a better quarterback. Austin Eckler. So we want to come around about Austin Eckler. Because here's some of the things I love about Austin Eckler. It's too bad Austin Eckler didn't have 1,000 yards as a rookie because it would help trash the 1,000-yard undrafted rookie. James Robinson's doing it right now too, by the way. Like an undrafted player can actually be really good. Like really, really good at running back.
James Robinson, talk about someone who overcame everything.
And continues
2 years in a row. That's what he did as a rookie.
Yeah.
And then zero belief whatsoever from his new coaching staff. And he just made himself inevitable.
Yes. Oh man, inevitable. I love that. There's some players that are just inevitable. Like Marshawn Lynch won the Super Bowl for the oh wait, that didn't actually happen. I felt like it was going to happen, but Austin Eckler's Christian McCaffrey. He's Christian McCaffrey.
He's very
for fantasy. He's Christian McCaffrey. I mean, and it's better probably because McCaffrey. I'm afraid. I hope this isn't true. I hope I'd eat these words, but I wonder if it's not truly breaking down Pat, but just like this is what happens when you ride a running back that hard. That's not Derrick Henry sized.
It's when you do it with zero nuance, because it's one thing to give him the big workloads, but Greg Rosenthal made this point. You got hurt on Thursday Night Football. The Sunday before, they were shoveling touches onto him, late in the second half of a game that they had already
meaningless
put away. Yeah. And there's got to be some nuance to it, and there wasn't any
karma
nuance in their usage.
Yeah, I thought maybe Chip Kelly was going to help us get out of this when he started doing the research on days you should be out before and nutritional shakes and things like that. But no, the NFL, I mean, since we're basically going to go off the rails and we can go wherever from this point. And folks, we love you. We both produce a lot of fantasy content. Pat Doherty, Roto Pat, NBC Sports Edge, nay, Roto World, and Football Guys. And you know what we provide. And we love giving you our fantasy takes, and we love riding the fantasy football roller coaster. But we got a little more time left to just really kind of go off the rails here, right? Because, we have to at least say the name Jon Gruden today. Right. We're not going to pretend that this isn't happening. But what Jon Gruden stands for, I think Jim Trotter, Jim Trotter, man. There's in our circles, there's not many names held in higher esteem than Jim Trotter. I recommend folks go and see what he had to say about this. But also, I think what it stands for in a larger sense, Pat, is that there is still a lot of old school thinking, old school ways. And it's not just the NFL. It's all leadership. Right? All the institutions of our country are just being steered in this way because, I don't even know really. And I think that we can talk about Jon Gruden like it's the stories about Jon Gruden, but I think Trotter said something like he's a tree in a forest.
Yeah, well, it's the thing the point I was just thinking about Jon Gruden and with our leaders writ large right now is just how few of them exceed our low expectations. It's not even we have high expectations for a lot of people. Jon Gruden, publicly presents himself as very old school, kind of a Luddite, kind of a knuckle dragger. Just all I care about is football. It's a guy where it seems like there's no nuance, and then you find out that there is indeed no nuance. He really is just that retrograde. That it's basically a knuckle dragger, and that you experience that phenomenon so much now where it's like, it's not even like, it's not even like I have expectations for like John Gruden to be like an angel or whatever, but to like see like laid bare, like how bad, like what is like really going on, like his inner life or whatever. And it's how common that phenomenon is, like in all of our leaders, our politicians, you know, like our university, if it's just like across the
All
board.
institutions, just all the
It
institutions
is
that
the
we had come to
crisis
depend
of
on.
American institutions
Right.
now.
Right. And it makes you ask the question, the story's not about John Gruden. The story is about a culture where John Gruden feels comfortable to be John Gruden.
Yeah, it's not a good mirror to look into, is it? And there's there's so many bad emblematic symbols of America. Like you can basically can't like turn around without bumping in to something that's like emblematic of America in a very bad
Well, because
way.
that's what happens when the true nature of things reveal themselves in this reality, in this plane that we're on. Is sometimes a thing reveals its inner nature in these moments, right? Maya Angelou, like when someone tells you who they are and things like that, you know? So, and it hasn't really ever been any different. Pat, is there any time, if we were free enough to actually have this conversation without the use of technology, that we would not have said the same thing about the leaders of different eras, right? Like absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's the play. It's kind of like the part in the play that they make. But when talking about the NFL, which I always like to say exists in a very gray area morally, very gray. Maybe I'm even being charitable.
The grayest, yeah, it's quite gray.
You know, and it's another good moment to say, like, let's not pretend that. I mean, the Rooney Rule, right? Like the Rooney Rule wasn't passed because there's progressives run amok at the NFL offices saying we need to do these proactive and things about equality. It's because there's actually something there that is to the people that can see it out in the open, maybe not to our eyes, that needs to be remedied in some way. And it's 2021 now, and this is the pace that things move forward. And I just think that this is a moment where the story is going to be about John Gruden, but that's not actually the story.
Stuff like the Rooney Rule, by the way, too. Like people view it like it's like some charity or something. Like it's actually from a selfish perspective makes a ton of sense for the NFL because the league is what 70% African American, and like they don't involve those people and like the coaching and like the front office. Like you're cutting off like such an enormous knowledge base. Like your sport is worse off for it that you're not like more proactively like and like it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the selfish right thing to do. Like you're depriving yourself of like so much knowledge and experience, and to like just recycle the same people over and over and over again. So like it's not even like it's just, I hate so much when it's framed like it's like some do-gooder like charity. It's not even like, it's because they're hurting themselves. They need to do this like actively to make their sport better and richer, and they're still not even coming close.
No, but hopefully, I mean, at the very least, when things like this happen, Pat, I always get at least a little bit of comfort at the idea that there are a few people that are a little scared, a little worried about what they know is what they've said that's out there.
Well, how in the world have only John Gruden's emails leaked from this? By the
way, well,
come on, like
that's where you get into like the Park Avenue conspiracy theories and things like that, right?
And it's kind of hard not to believe them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear Aunt Lance's earline echoing in my head saying, "You don't want to know how the sausage is made, you know? You don't." Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, as we circled all the way around at the beginning, it's the compelling nature of watching people really lay everything out on the line in a way, like have everything in their whole life and lots of other people's lives culminate in these moments. And it's awe-inspiring, and it is what keeps us coming back. Where else could I possibly go? You know, I always want to try to stoke your St. Louis pride. Like I feel like I have so much pride. I've only lived in New Orleans for like 3 years, and I have all this pride. I want to I feel like I want to have a segment where people talk about what's special about where they live or where they grew up or something that they got to know just because of geography.
Well, like I said, I've always taken great pride in growing up at the confluence of the two great rivers of the continent. And like, I love like river, like people like don't think about like the ecology of like river systems. Mm-hmm. You saw like how truly awe-inspiring it is, like how much of this continent is draining into this watershed. And I live at one of like the really interesting confluences. You live at the truly interesting confluence where it meets the ocean and becomes miles wide. And that's just Yeah, I have a lot of some could say irrational St. Louis pride. Like I always remind people, like St. Louis is a lot bigger than, not that bigger is like the end all be all. It's a lot bigger than you think. It's 3 million people. It's still the 20th largest metro area in the country. Don't forget about St. Louis. We're not some also ran. You know, a bit of tough times, but yeah, it's a great town. It's a great. St. Louis is definitely. I love St. Louis because it's still like small compared to the metropolises of the country, but it's also like it's big enough. There's nothing you can't. There's nothing you could really want to do that you can't do in St. Louis, which some people might not really believe or take umbrage with. I mean, you can't like climb a mountain or go to the ocean, but it's a big, huge area full of wonderful people and a really good food. By the way, don't mock our food, even though everyone does. And I'm just rambling, but I do love St. Louis.
Yeah, I hope that there's something about where everybody's from that they love, you know, and absolutely there's that affinity with. I almost wanted to talk about St. Louis and the actual like literal. We got the French involved here, but the Mississippi River is much more interesting, right? And also, I got to mention that St. Louis is close to Cahokia, right? Close to the.
It is very. I've actually been thinking. I have not been to the mounds since I was a child. I have 3 young children. I know. I need to go. Really.
Pat.
I almost went last Saturday.
Good. That's good. That's good. Almost counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Yes.
Okay? No, it's good because Cahokia is like one of the great. Isn't it a UNESCO World Heritage Site?
It is one of the great cultural heritage sites in the entire world.
It was one of the original metropolis on Earth. I mean,
Mississippian people were an astounding people.
Yeah, there's so much that's astounding, folks. If you actually understand what happened before us, you should be and would be astounded. This history we've been told really presents the current moment as like the culmination of everything and the height of all human activity, and that just isn't true. I think about stuff I've learned about the Aborigines, but down here in New Orleans, what makes the Mississippi really interesting is that it actually, the way I've heard it described as the hand of a piano player that has jumped in between all of these different rivers. So the Mississippi has actually been drained into a bunch of different places. That's why it
wants to go somewhere different right now.
Yes, and it's John McPhee. John McPhee, the piece from the 80s, Atchafalaya. It's one of the most amazing long form, like 45 pages, 50 pages. I think it was in the New Yorker about humans versus nature. And it just talks about that point in the river where it wants to. It's a fascinating stuff. John McPhee writes some great stuff. But yeah, the river looms over everything, right? I think people from Memphis have to attest to that, and so on.
Well, St. Louis, it's we try to master it, and we just can't master it.
It's the river. It's kind of like again that story of human beings and how we can harness things to a certain point, but we can't. Eventually, they get loosed on us because we're still in the system, but we tell these stories about ourselves, Pat, because we know it's in our nature to just keep trying. No matter how many times we learn the lesson, we're going to keep learning it over again, just like with fantasy football, which is why we love getting together with you all on the couch. Thank you so much, folks. Again, Roto Pat at NBC Sports Edge. Me, Sigmund Bloom, football guys. And, it's still just so much to come. I can't even imagine what it's going to look like, but we'll experience it together because you're so classy.